Michael, we are good.
Is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask your name, item number you wish to address, and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions of the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with the proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us. Matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of the discussion. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the Ontario Land Tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. Secretary Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in this electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. Let's see, we have regrets from Ms. McHale tonight. Committee members, any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Okay. At this time, we'll entertain requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications. Madam Secretary Treasurer, I believe we have a request from 1240 Baldwin.
Yes, we do. Just a second, they need to raise a hand for request.
Evening. Good evening. Sorry. I hit the button too fast. It unmuted me and muted me again. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Yes, we're seeking a deferral for 1240 Baldwin. While we have neighborhood support, we seem to have had a change in heart from some of the planning comments from where we thought we were in the last few days. So we have a meeting with them on Friday, and would like to meet with them again, see if we can bring them on side and then come back to the committee. But we know the residents are supportive at this point. So I'll go back through the committee, and when we've got some amended drawings, and seek the appropriate time to come back before you. So.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions? All those in favor of the deferral? That is unanimous. Your application has been deferred.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Madam Secretary Treasurer, are there any other requests for deferral?
Mr. Chair, I do have person Thomas Tokarczuk. He raised his hand and I am promoting him to panelist, and I don't know what is the question from him.
Okay, I see him in now. Good evening, Mr. Tokarczuk. You can unmute yourself and turn your camera on. Be appreciated. We're briefly unmuted, but you're muted again.
There. I'm unmuted.
Oh, there you go. Okay, what application are you here for?
The appointment, the request to extend the rear extension to Brays Lane.
Are you the applicant?
No, I'm not. I live across the road from the applicant.
Oh, okay. So we're not hearing the item at this point. We're just, they're seeking people who are looking to defer any applications.
Oh, I see. I understand. Okay, no problem.
That will come in a little later in the evening, that item.
Okay, yeah, I won't be able to stay for that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, are there any other requests for deferral?
Mr. Chair, I don't see anybody that requesting deferral.
Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to the first application of the evening. That's CAVA 172 at 235 Wembley Road. If anybody in the audience wishes to speak to this application, you can call in at 905-815-6095.
Mr. Chair, I don't see the agent or applicant for this application. If you just can remind them that they need to raise a hand if they want to speak, because I don't see anybody from the registered agent for this application.
So if the agent or applicant for 235 Wembley Road is watching, if you could raise your hand for the Secretary Treasurer.
I'm promoting Mr. Suad Ahmed.
Good evening. You can unmute yourself and turn your camera on, please.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. Chair and the committee members. Sorry about that. Yes, I just got that all hooked up now. My name is Syed Ahmed from Lifestyle Home Products. For our application CAV A172-2022. This is regarding a sunroom construction in the back of the house. And there's a minor variance we have at the setback for the rear yard is 7.9 supposed to be, and we are proposing for 6.6. The other way around, it's a 0.09 meters difference for the setback. We appreciate if we can get that application approved, and if there is any question, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Get your address, please, for the record.
Oh, sorry. The address is 235 Wembley Road, Oakville. Do you need my phone number too?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Just again, if anyone is watching and wants to speak to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Committee members, do you have any questions for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anybody called to speak to this application?
No phone calls for this application has been received.
Okay, thank you. And we'll close discussion and I'll look for a motion. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as noting that the town's staff report is in support of the motion, also noting that there were no letters of support or objection to the application. I would like to move a motion in support of the application as applied for, finding that it meets all tests of the Planning Act. And I would like to include the two following conditions. The first one, that the sunroom one-story addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 8th, 2022. And our second standard condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Any discussion, Mr. Hardcastle? Seeing none. All those in support a motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Have a good evening. We will move to application CAV A174 at 2052 Braes Lane.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Noor El Gandhi, and I'm the authorized agent for 2052 Braes Lane. So we're proposing to construct a one-story sunroom addition on the rear yard of the house, and we would like to request a minimum rear yard setback of 5.17 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum rear yard setback of 6 meters. So we're requesting a decrease in rear yard setback of 0.83 meters. I did look at the staff report. It looks like the planning staff are in favor of the proposal and they believe it meets the 4 tests. We do have 2 letters of support and 3 letters of objections. I did look at the comments of the neighbors that are in objection, and I made some comments as well. If we can go to, yes, if we can go to slide number 10. So these are the concerns from Mrs. Nancy Wallace. She's the direct neighbor of my client at 2052 Braes Lane. And her concerns are blocking the view to the east, noise from the AC unit, and the blinds, resale value. I'm not sure if you had the chance to look at it, or would you like me to go through it quickly?
If you could just go through it quickly.
Okay, so the sunroom addition, like her concern is that it will block the view to the east, and it will affect the natural light entering, but it shouldn't affect the natural light more than a retractable awning would, or any more than her current awning blocks the evening sun from entering 2052 Braes Lane. So actually she has an awning that blocks the natural light to my client's house. It will also not, there's a privacy fence. If we go back to picture number like 3, page 7, please. Yes, so here, if you can see, there's a fence, and the sunroom will just be a bit higher. So there's already a fence blocking the view, so it will not really be that much of a difference. Can we please go back to page number 10? Thank you. The noise from the AC unit. So again, if we go back to page number 7, this is the AC unit, and the room will be above the AC unit. So if anything, it might block, it might decrease the noise she currently hears. And I believe my client is planning to install a small split unit, and the noise is like very minimal noise. And then one of her concerns is the blinds due to unbearable heat. So if you can see, this is a solid wall. There's no need to put blinds. Like, we're not gonna put blinds based on the glazing allowance. We're not allowed any glass on this side anyway. And the resale value is always higher after this sunroom. It's never like less, and it will not only increase the value of my client's house, but all the neighborhoods. So these are the concerns, and this is how I address them. If we go to slide 11, please. So these are other concerns from 2056 Braes Lane. So this is, I can show you, if we can please go to page 2. So here we have the highlighted in yellow are the letters of objection. 2054, this is Ms. Nancy Wallace, which I've already addressed her concerns. And then there's objection from 2056 and then 2055. I'm not sure how 2055 is affected, to be honest, but yeah, their like concerns are more or less similar to Ms. Nancy Wallace, and we have letters of support from 2050 and 2048. I don't really have anything to add unless you have questions for me.
Okay, thank you. I know your one neighbor was hoping to speak, but looks like he wasn't able to stick around. Madam Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Archon is still on the line?
I'm promoting him to the panelist, but all of them who wants to speak, they need to raise the hand.
Okay, so before I'll just check with committee members if they have any questions for the applicant. I see none. Mr. Picarchuk, if you're still watching, if you could raise your hand.
I have difficulty to promote him to the panelist, but I can allow him to talk.
Okay.
Maybe I. I think he's lost from the attendees, and I don't know what is happening.
He did indicate that he wouldn't be able to attend for long. Perhaps he had to go.
Mr. Chair, I don't see him like as a attendee anymore, so.
Okay, well, we do have his written objection, as he's concerned that it will set a precedent and cause devaluation of property or the use of adjacent decks will encourage further extensions. Okay, Madam Secretary Treasurer, nobody else has called in?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, then I'm gonna close discussion on this matter and look for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle, is that you?
Well, why, thank you, Mr. Chair. It was going to be me. I'm just wading through my digital material here. Just bear with me for a moment, please.
I was having problems seeing you.
That's right. Mr. Chairman, having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, having heard the presentation, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. I believe that there are appropriate measures being undertaken in order to protect privacy and overview with the zero lot line condition for the sunroom addition. As we know, each application is judged on its own merit, so the repeated theme of precedent is, in my mind, addressed by the individual context of this, and I believe that the presentation provided by the applicant, the agent for the owner, satisfactorily addressed the other requirements. So I will put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions. Those conditions being that the sunroom one-story addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings as part of the application, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? See none. All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Have a good evening. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
along to CAV A175 at 383 Chartwell Road. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, if you can please call in at 905-815-6095. I see we have Mr. Demchuk here for this application. Good evening.
Good evening, members of the committee. I have prepared a brief presentation for tonight's meeting. Okay, great. I see it up on the screen there. So yes, my name is Paul Demchuk. I am the land use planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 383 Chartwell Road. Next slide, please. So I've prepared as I mentioned, a brief presentation for the benefit of the committee tonight. I know there's, I believe, another delegate after this, after my presentation. So I would like to go through, address all the variances we are requesting as part of this application, and obviously speak to the nuance of each. So the subject site, just measuring just over 4,700 square meters, is an irregular flag-shaped lot. With 6.54 meters of frontage on Chartwell Road. A detached dwelling is currently located on the subject site. Just for the benefit of the committee, in January of 2019, a previous consent to sever and minor variance applications at that time were submitted to the town of Oakville for the properties at 383 Chartwell Road and 1039 Cedar Grove Boulevard, which created 2 new severed residential parcels, and then the 1 retained parcel being the subject property before the committee this evening. I will note that an additional block was also conveyed to the town to expand on the adjacent Morrison Creek lands that was associated with the development at that time. Next slide, please. So there's a number of variances before the committee this evening, including a reduction to the, increase to the driveway width, increase to the garage floor area, and the maximum width of the entrance to the garage, an increase in the required dwelling depth, a reduction in the front yard, as well as an increase in the maximum height. Next slide, please. This is a site plan of the proposed reconstructed dwelling on the property. So the proposed development is comprised of an executive 2-story single detached dwelling with an overall floor area of 980 square meters on this large irregular shaped flag lot. The dwelling covers approximately 19.5% of the property. And as mentioned, the proposed height is of the dwelling is 10 meters. The existing vehicle access from Chartwell Road obviously continues to be utilized. And the proposed building has been located to fit appropriately onto the subject site, falling within the required coverage and floor area requirements and meeting or exceeding all required setbacks with the exception of the front yard setback. I will note the proposed dwelling has been sited to accommodate and protect existing large canopy trees located both on the subject site as well as on the border of adjacent properties. There's a total of 144 trees located on the subject site that are regulated by the town's tree protection bylaws, of which 18 will require removal in the location of the existing dwelling, as well as the rear yard of the proposed dwelling to accommodate for the private amenity space of the property. Next slide, please. This is a rendering just of the entrance into the property. I will note that the front facade of the building is characterized by a series of rectangular windows situated across the first and second floors. A prominent front entry feature is located at the center of the front facade. And the building features a shingled mansard roof on both the 2-story main portion of the residence, as well as the 1-story attached garage. The southeast facades include 4 garage doors and an otherwise similar facade treatment to the front of the building. And the rear elevation features a series of large rectangular windows overlooking the rear yard. In the rear yard includes an in-ground swimming pool, a sports court, and an entertainment pavilion are proposed, along with a series of seating areas and landscape spaces. Next slide, please. This is just an image showing the front elevation. You can see that on the right-hand side of this front elevation is the portion where the garage is located. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation. Again, on the left side is, in this image, is where the garage is located. There is a one-story building component, again, on the left side of the drawing that you can see, which is where the darker shaded windows are located. I'll come to that again in a moment. Next slide, please. And here are the respective side elevations. Again, you can see that the building has been broken up in terms of its massing with a number of single-story building components, including the garage, but also other portions of the home to break up some of the massing. Next slide, please. I'd like to just briefly take the committee through each of the proposed variances and some of the thought process behind each of them. Actually, just before I get to this driveway width variance, I would like to just speak to the front yard setback. So typically the front yard setback and the intent of that is to ensure a consistent setback of buildings fronting the street line, as well as accommodate space for landscaping and parking. I will note that the required setback on this property is the existing setback, less 1 meter. In this instance, given the irregular flag-shaped lot, it's not possible to situate the proposed building on the site in a way which contributes to a consistent street line. And the primary considerations in siting this building was limiting impacts on adjacent lots, providing adequate space for landscaping, and also ensuring the residents provided an adequate setback from the adjacent Morrison Creek natural area. The existing dwelling on the site is situated toward the north end of the property in close proximity to the adjacent Morrison Creek natural area, while the proposed dwelling is situated towards the southwest portion of the site, located closer to the front lot line of the property, providing much greater separation distance to this natural area. The siting of the dwelling provides opportunity to maintain and enhance on-site landscaping, both through the preservation of existing trees and planting of new trees, as well as the inclusion of hard and soft landscaping areas. I will also note the site has had regard for setbacks from adjacent properties. The distance between the dwelling and the lot line abutting 1031 Cedar Grove is greater than 13 meters. And the distance from the proposed dwelling to the existing house at 389 Chartwell Road is approximately 45 meters. In terms of the driveway width, the intent of obviously the driveway width in the zoning bylaw is to minimize the amount of paved surface in the front yard visible to the public realm. I will note that the increased width of the driveway is only for a small portion of the driveway that's located in the front of the property, and you can see that line where it's noted as visitor parking. Specifically, there's a line that shows that 9-meter width where tree number 167 is. I will note that the existing driveway and entrance at the property adjacent to 385 Chartwell is not being altered, and also maintains the existing width of approximately 3.4 meters entering into the site. Next slide, please. In terms of the garage area and width, so the intent of the maximum garage area and width is to mitigate potential negative impacts on the streetscape, as well as the design of the garage, or mitigate the design of the garage from dominating the architecture of a dwelling. Also, in many cases, it's likely that in situations like this, for these executive style homes, 56 square meters is sometimes a challenge for vehicle parking, especially as it is designed in relation to the proposed dwelling. So in this instance, the garage area is appropriate relative to the size of the proposed dwelling, which itself is appropriately sited and scaled for the site. The proposed garage, which is a 1-story structure, is also set back 13 meters from the adjacent property line, with a series of boundary trees being located at this portion of the site. The size and location of the garage will not have any negative impact on the adjacent property at 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard. And further, the garage is not visible from the streetscape, nor is it a visually dominant feature of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So in terms of the dwelling depth regulation is intended to regulate the scale and massing of the dwelling. It's also intended to ensure there's a reasonable degree of consistency in relation to dwelling units in the general and surrounding area. I will note that the majority of the dwelling is compliant with the provisions for dwelling depth in the zoning bylaw. So most of the dwelling is, and you can see there on the screen, most of the dwelling is approximately 15.7 meters in depth, with the exception of the one-story component, which is only for a small portion of the dwelling located on the southern part of the dwelling, which it extends to just over 27 meters in depth. And again, that increase in depth is only for a one-story component, and also includes the measurement from that rear wall of the dwelling to the front porch of the dwelling, which is included in that calculation. Next slide, please. So in terms of the height, the intent of the maximum building height is to obviously mitigate potential impacts related to overlook, shadow, loss, and sky view with adjacent properties, as well as maintain consistency in the area's physical character. The maximum permitted height in the zone is obviously 9 meters, and the proposed dwelling height is 10 meters. So based on the design, siting, and size of the proposed dwelling relative to the lot size, as well as the characteristics of houses in the immediate area, the proposed increase in height is not anticipated to result in any appreciable impact on the adjacent properties or the character of the area. I will note that the location of the dwelling is cited to maintain, as mentioned earlier, to maintain existing large and numerous grounded trees in the property, which serve to mitigate any issues that may result from the 1 meter increase in additional building height. The proposed building, as well as noted, steps down from 2 stories to 1 towards the south, east towards the adjacent house located at 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard. And the distance between the 2-story portion of the dwelling and the lot line abutting 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard is greater than 20 meters. And further, the distance from the 1-story attached garage to the southeast property line is greater than 13 meters. Further, the adjacent nearest property to the west of the proposed dwelling at 389 Chartwell Road is located approximately 45 meters from the proposed dwelling. Again, which is between a series of existing boundary trees, which are not being impacted through the proposed development. In my opinion, the proposed development does obviously seek to mitigate impacts related to privacy and overlook issues. Next slide, please. There was a pretty comprehensive planning justification report submitted with the application. It's my opinion that the proposed variances are in keeping with the official plan, intent of the zoning bylaw, are considered minor in nature and appropriate and desirable development for the area. So in my opinion, they do satisfy the 4 tests. I will note that my client and I have been working pretty closely as well over the last approximately 8 months with planning staff, urban design staff, conservation Halton, as well as Halton region staff through the associated site plan application for the proposed property to get to this point this evening. We have read the staff report. We have obviously no additional concerns or comments with the staff report, but I would like to just summarize that as part of my presentation. And I'm before the committee, and we'd be happy to answer and assist if there are any questions this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Don't see any at this time. I believe there's some neighbors that wish to speak, so Mr. Demchuk will call you back after that, and you can respond. Madam Secretary Treasurer, do we have any parties wishing to speak to this application?
They need to raise their hand. I still don't see anybody. Okay, I do have a couple now. I'm just gonna promote them.
I'm seeing Mr. Price on the screen now.
There we go. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, members of the public. I'm Frank Price. I've lived here at 389 Chartwell Road with my wife for over 35 years. Next slide, please. So we've reviewed the plans and the presentation, and we feel that the site is not in keeping with the official plan. There are traffic hazards, which I'll go into later on. I also submitted a letter from my wife and I about other issues, including, well, the possible heritage protection for the home at 383 that as it exists. We also had concerns about the trees, so that you know, during construction in particular, they'd be severely impacted. They've already been impacted by construction or the severing of the lot where the trees have been trimmed severely. So I expect they will probably end up in further degrading condition. Oh, also, I should disclose that I do work for the town of Oakville as in the transportation engineering department as a urban design inspector. So what that means is I look at site plans for compliance and return securities accordingly. So I am somewhat familiar with the site plan process and you know, issues that arise throughout the process. Next slide, please. So one of the main issues that I did raise earlier with the severance was the location of the driveway. And this is a slide looking south toward the lake. I'm saying south is the lake as we do in Oakville. And you can see the close proximity of that. I'll be comparing other properties too that are you know, flag lots and the locations. So this is a major issue for safety for the public, and unfortunately, it wasn't really dealt with in the severance. So unfortunately, we'll have to, you know, probably do something about it now through the site plan process. Next slide, please. So here you see the same driveway and Cedar Grove and McDonald, and the proximity, how close they are to one another. They're allowing full turns, left, right. There's no stop. There is a hump, a speed hump there, but people tend to take care, and you can see a lot of the marks from people humping that hump and you know, trying to you know, keep their speed up. Next slide, please. So this is also looking out from Cedar Grove, so you'll see how difficult that turn is for a lot of people turning right, left, and the full movements for that for those intersections in their driveways. Next slide, please. So these are other lots. Well, shows the lot on Chartwell and the distance to the center line of the road. So here we have a total of 13 meters to the center line from the driveway to the Cedar Grove. Next slide, please. A little more to McDonald too. This is a flag lot further down on Chartwell, and you can see that we have a 13.5 meter entrance. There aren't any other roads in the vicinity that would restrict movement. Next slide, please. This is another lot, and same one, and I've shown the distance to the different streets, so there's really not too much restriction that way with cross traffic and things. Next slide, please. So Morrison Road is the same thing. I believe that's a church on Morrison. Getting full movements there. Next slide, please. So you can see there's quite a bit of distance between the other roads that tour Morrison and are close to the driveway. Next slide, please. So that's the same. Next slide, please. Yeah, we're showing the distances again. Next slide, please. And here we have Lakeshore Road East. So it's a wider flag lot. Next slide, please. You can see that there's quite a distance between the road and the driveway. Next slide, please. Here that it actually shares the driveway with other properties, but the distance I think mitigates some of the problems with that. Next slide, please. And I'm showing 1415 Lakeshore Road East, and they've got a narrow flag lot entrance. Next slide, please. So you can see the distances between the road there, lawn and the other. So it remind you that McDonald was 48.3 and Cedar Grove 13.33 meters. Next slide, please. So that's the photo of that lot of 1415. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're looking at view of the existing home. I took it from a sales brochure when the home was sold. So this is the existing home, and it's set back far enough, but even with the trees as they are, there's quite a bit of overlook, and you can see our home clearly. This is in the summer, full leaf, so there are quite a few deciduous trees. A lot of these conifers will be removed, so that will also increase the overview to our property. Next slide, please. So I have the footprint of the old home in green and the existing home. So you can see the difference between where the green outline is and the new home. That would increase the overlook of our home. Next slide, please. So I was looking at the heights of the road, and as I noted in the previous slide, that the elevations are taken from the center of the driveway by the road. So I used this plan to take the elevations. Next slide, please. And so you see here at the road, it's 95.48 meters. Next slide, please. And then the home itself, where the proposed front door will be, approximately where that the conifer is, it'll most likely be removed. 94.8 meters. Next slide, please. So our property is 93.72 meters at the foundation. Next slide, please. So there's quite a difference between the properties. So I've put them all together, and agreeing the additional height is more than a meter. It's close to 2.76 meters when that you include the change in grade and the difference between the road and the two properties. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mr. Price, I gave Mr. Demchuk additional time for his presentation, and I've given you double your allotted time, but I'm going to have to ask you to very quickly wrap it up.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm coming to the end. I'm saying my last slide is I guess I'm saying it should be consent should be denied. It does not meet the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Does not meet the purpose of the zoning bylaw. It sets a precedent for future applications and is not minor because of our impact to our property in the neighborhood. And I should point out that the turning movements for the driveway, I'm not sure if it's possible to restrict right in, right out as we do at commercial driveways, but you know, that would at least mitigate some of the problems with that. If not, well, it should be not denied for safety purposes. Well, thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions, Mr. Price?
Mr. Chair, would you wait for a second? There is some issue with the sound.
Madam Secretary Treasurer, I'm getting a beeping sound at my end. I didn't hear that.
I can't hear you.
You can hear or not?
Hello? We cannot hear what is going on because of the beeping noise in the background.
Yeah, okay. Now
Sean Jedkowitz. I'm 1031 Cedar Grove Boulevard on the adjacent property. I truly was unable to make any intelligence of the previous 10 minutes of discussion. I think because of IT issues, and I maybe suggest an adjournment because I could not really understand what my neighbor had to say. Can you give any comments about that?
sorry, Mr. Chair, I need to hold for a second. We do have the technical issue with the sound, and if you can everyone hold for a couple seconds until they resolve the problem. Thank you.
Okay, I still am unable to understand the discussion. Could others please identify if they're having the same issue as me, or is it just me? We get head nods from Mr. Hardcastle. So really, the discussion is really non-productive, in my opinion, tonight because of IT issues. Perhaps we might consider proposing to meet at a later date so we can have a wholesome discussion of all the issues. I wished myself to be heard, but in a proper fashion.
Are we gonna? Okay. I just heard from my IT department that we need 5 minutes to restart the whole view, but if you can just hold for a couple minutes, they're gonna resolve the problem. Thank you so much.
Please advise on how I am to proceed.
It looks like the problem is resolved. Not?
As soon as you're in Zoom, that's when the beeping starts. So it's someone.
I don't mean to overstep, but I noticed that whenever Mr. Sean unmutes himself, the sound is starting. So I actually am wondering if it's an issue on Sean's end that's then broadcasting to the rest of the broadcast.
Yes, our help desk, they told us that it's from Mr. Sean, but apparently they resolved the problem. So I believe we are not going to experience anymore any difficulties.
Okay, let's hope that's fixed. Committee members, I was able to hear Mr. Price's presentation. I was only getting the feedback at the very end. To summarize, you focused generally on the driveway and the distance of it to the intersection compared to, and the frontage compared to others in the neighborhood, and then focused on the proximity of the house and proposed house in his rear yard and the difference in the height. So I'm not sure if Mr. Price is still here, so I will ask committee members if they have any questions for Mr. Price. I see none. So hopefully, sir, if I see your hand up, if Madam Secretary Treasurer, are you able to allow him back into the meeting, or is he in the meeting? He just needs to unmute himself?
He just needs to unmute himself in order to speak. Mr. Sean.
Good evening again, sir. If we can just get your name and address for the record first, please. You appear to be muted. Are able to unmute yourself, sir?
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay.
We still have the same problem as soon as you unmute yourself.
Unmuted myself. Is that better I might have something connected at the same time, 2 computers perhaps. Is that a little better now?
No, we still have the same issue. Oh, yeah. If you're signed into this meeting on 2 different devices, that could be the problem.
Is it the same? Is it just me, or is it another panelist?
Apparently, it's as soon as you unmute yourself is when the problem occurs, but not with anybody else.
Okay, well, I've logged off all of my computers, and I will use this computer alone. Are you hearing me at all?
I can hear you. Committee members, are you able to hear? There is feedback in the background, but sir, if you can try to proceed, and if committee members, if you can't hear the presentation, let me know, and we'll have to defer again. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Sure, this is a suboptimal. I have to put that for the record. So I'm the homeowner at 1031 Cedar Grove, and my 2 issues I have, which were nicely outlined in the documents I've received, and as well from Paul Demchak. 1031 Cedar Grove lies quite close to the 4-car garage proposed at the Watkin residence. We have about 5 or 6 trees there, and in their tree proposal, they do not comment on which trees they are proposing to remove. That's my first question. And my second question is, as far as I can tell with my research, the 385 property is not owned by Mr. Watkins or the numbered company, but speaking to the previous owners of 383, long-standing owners, they have installed sewage right through the front lawn of 385. My concern is, at some point, will this, and it's on the plan that's proposed, will this require a repositioning of the sewage alongside 385 that will disrupt a huge windrow of trees alongside the laneway adjacent to our property, thus perhaps causing a strain or death to those trees?
Okay, thank you, sir. You can remute yourself, and we'll bring Mr. Demchuk back in and have him respond to your questions. Okay, Mr. Demchuk, if I can briefly recap, you've heard from 2 of the neighbors concerned with respect to the location of the driveway, the location of the house and height in relation to his home, and with the adjacent neighbor question about which trees are between his home and the garage are proposed to be removed, and whether any reconstruction of the sewage lines are going to impact trees on that property line. Okay, if you can keep yourself muted, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll provide comments first on the neighbor's comments who lives at 1031 Cedar Grove. So there are a number of border trees that exist in between where the garage is located and the neighboring property at 1031 Cedar Grove. Those trees are, all border trees are protected and maintained through the proposed development. And similarly, where the sewage as well as water lines come out onto Chartwell Road, none of those border trees in the existing, where the existing entrances to the site are being impacted. So all those trees are proposed to be maintained and protected. And that's consistent through the site plan application on the tree preservation plans that's been submitted to the town. I can't comment on 385 Chartwell and their sewer lines. As was noted, my client does not own those on those lands. If I could, I would like to spend a moment. I just made some notes, and I would like to speak to the other delegates' comments. So just first, I would note the applications, again, before the committee this evening are only for a minor variance for the dwelling. There are no consent applications this evening. The consent application for this site was previously approved in 2019. I would further note, just as it relates to the comments pertaining to heritage, the subject property is not a listed property or a designated property under the Heritage Act. There was comments about potential damage to trees, to fencing details, etc. I will note again, for the benefit of the committee and the public, there are site plan securities that are obviously posted through the approval process to secure for those items, and specifically in this instance for this unique property. In terms of the driveway access and its location, that was dealt with obviously at the time and looked at the time of the consent application. I will further note that this proposal is replacing one residential unit with one residential unit, and no traffic concerns or comments have been raised from Oakville engineering staff through the site plan process related to that. Essentially, we're dealing with an existing condition of the site for access, and there is no other access mechanism, unfortunately, to the site to accommodate the driveway. Just in terms of the elevations and the height, I made a few notes just pertaining to that. So there was a comment that the existing driveway road elevation is 95.48. Just for the benefit of the committee, that's actually the established grade elevation for the property in terms of where it's measured based on the zoning bylaw definition. There's a comment about the proposed elevation of the dwelling being 94.8. I'm not sure exactly where that's taken from. It's noted that the driveway elevation plus 1 meter is 96.48 in the presentation. And sorry, this was on, I believe, slide number 25 of the delegate's presentation. I believe this number is incorrect. So the driveway elevation of 95.8 at the garage entrance is shown on the architectural drawings, as well as our grading plans. So it's not the 96.48, which is a meter higher than what it is approximately. And then there's a comment about the additional height is 2.76 meters. Respectfully, I don't believe that the town calculates the building height in this manner. The allowable height is 9 meters, which is calculated from the established grade. And the proposed is 10 meters, again, which is 1 meter over the allowable limit, not the 2.76 meters. I don't have any other comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll just add for the Cedar Grove neighbor, when I look at the site plan that was presented, there's only 3 trees shown in the vicinity of your house slated for removal, and they are all to the west of your garage. So none of the trees between your house and the proposed dwelling are indicated to be removed. Okay, committee members, any questions for Mr. Demchuk at this point? I see none, so I'm going to close discussion and entertain a motion. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have reviewed the applicant's submission, as well as the town staff report, noting that it is in favor or in support of the variances being applied for on this application. Also taking into account the comments presented by the applicant's agent this evening, as well as noting that there were some written objections and oral objections that were presented from the neighbors this evening. I do think that some of the comments on the first presentation, I respect the neighbors coming out and speaking to their objections at this meeting. I did, though, note and Mr. Demchak kind of commented on it. The property is what it is, and that driveway access is where it is. So I was having trouble sort of the time being spent on where that is located in comparison to other properties in the area. I don't find are relevant to the application that is being presented this evening for the variances that have been requested. So I just wanted to make that point, as well as I think that I do agree with the statements that are made on each variance noted in the staff's report. So what I'm saying is I am in favor of this application as it has been applied for. I do find that it meets the intent of the Planning Act, all four tests, and I would like to move the motion in support of. I would like to include the condition that the development be constructed in general accordance with the final approved site plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. And secondly, our standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Okay, that is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
We'll now move on to CAVA 176 at 407 Trafalgar Road. Anybody with an interest in this application, if you can call 905-815-6095. And the agent can, I see, just being advanced now. Good evening. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Veronica Lardbet, and I am the architect and agent for the owner for the subject property of 407 Trafalgar Road, file number CAVA 176-2022. If we're ready, I can proceed to the next slide.
If we can just get your address, please, for the record.
Oh, sure. Sorry about that. 127 Mountjoy, Toronto, Ontario.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
Sure. So next slide. This property is located on the northeast side of Trafalgar Road, below the major intersection of Trafalgar and Cornwall. It has a lot frontage of approximately 200 feet along Trafalgar and is approximately 120 feet in depth. Next slide. We've put together a few images of the existing conditions in site just for your reference. We think they're relevant given that 407 is a heritage designated house. The existing house or the existing garage shed has not been identified as part of the heritage designation. The garage condition is relatively poor. It's been built directly on existing soil without a slab, which is leading to some decay on the interior of the structure. And the wall thickness and size of the structure itself preclude us from actually using the space to accommodate a full-size vehicle. So the repair costs essentially weren't deemed reasonable as an option given the lack of usability of the existing ancillary building. We just wanted to also show these images to note the neighboring property at 410's existing shed in the center image on the side yard setback, and to the rear, the fourth image, we have the image showing the rear yard neighbor's existing garage structure, which is larger in massing and width and height than what we're essentially proposing. And then finally, we just have a quick image of the connection point that we intend to link the new addition to. Next slide. So essentially the project is the owners wish to demolish their existing garage and erect a new garage along with a small additional interior space for the family's use. The two minor variances we're seeking to get are for rear and side yard setbacks. They're essentially non-conforming existing conditions with the existing garage. So for the side yard setback, we're actually improving it ever so slightly by 0.6 meters to allow for a little bit better drainage. And then for the rear yard setback, we're maintaining the existing condition. Next slide. Now we've just shown quickly the existing site plan for your reference. Again, it's just to show the location of the existing garage, as we are trying to maintain some of the existing encroachment, and then also demonstrate the placement of the neighboring properties' existing shed and garage structures. Next slide. So this is essentially our proposed site plan. We're essentially infilling the space between the existing garage footprint and the existing house. Because we're dealing with a heritage property, we are pretty limited in what we can do in terms of interventions to the existing house. Also, just in terms of fitting a garage space, we have quite a bit of a pinch point between the side yard setback. So we tried to bring it in as much as we could, but we had to maintain some space to allow for a garage door to fit. Next slide. Again, this is just a quick view of the plans. It shows the garage at the front that essentially abuts the edge of the house. And then we've tucked in a little bit of a flex space for the owners at the rear. Next slide. And then because the property is heritage designated, we work quite closely with the Heritage Committee on this proposal, and we've gone through a fair amount of iterations. We want to show kind of the existing condition versus the proposed, just to demonstrate that what we're proposing really won't affect the character and the view from Trafalgar Road. So what we're proposing is essentially a very similar aesthetic with a peak roof, a little bit more pinched to allow for that side yard setback increase, but otherwise it's a very similar look from Trafalgar Road. At the rear, even though the neighboring garage is quite close, we've also maintained a very similar aesthetic and look, just to avoid impeding on their visual, their view in the rear yard. And the heights have just been adjusted ever so slightly just to suit the house itself and the locations of the details in the trim of the heritage house. Next slide. And then essentially these are the last elevations. We have the two side elevations. The first one at the top just demonstrates what the owners will view from within their backyard. Again, having worked with Heritage pretty closely, we've added a couple little details like this window, the transom window, which essentially has been taken or based off of the existing garage's window, which was the requirement from them. And then we've tried to be very respectful of the existing character of the house. On the lower elevation, it's essentially the elevation that faces the north and the neighboring property at 410. We just want to highlight that there is a fence line that runs along the entirety of the property, and there's no intent to remove it, but we did step down the profile of the addition just to kind of lighten the elevation a little bit, should for any reason that fence line disappear at some point. Next slide. So again, we believe that what is being proposed is in keeping with the general character of the street, the existing heritage home, and that the variances requested are minor and meet the intent of the Planning Act. In terms of the placement, the proposed work doesn't encroach any further on the existing rear property than the existing. Equally, given the limitations of the space available on the northwest side and the required minimums to accommodate a single car garage door opening, the side yard setback was improved as best as possible. And then in terms of the overall scale of the overall scale of the project has been constrained to a single story, given its proximity to both property lines. The front facade garage carries a very similar aesthetic, again, to the existing garage to maintain the existing look and feel. And the proposed also allows for the family to kind of introduce a small support space to accommodate spatial needs whilst limiting the visual impact to the neighbors. So we hope that you will support our application and agree with staff that the proposed variances are in fact minor in nature. Thanks.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions for the applicant? Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There is no phone calls, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we'll close discussion and I'll look for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, and having heard the detailed presentation by the applicant, thank you. I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I think that visual impacts are being satisfactorily addressed, and any functional pieces around stormwater and that kind of thing can be addressed through future processes and are being accommodated for here. So I have no concerns with respect to these. I will put forward a motion of approval subject to 2 conditions. Those being that the 1-story attached garage and rear addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated September 2022, and that the approval expires 2 years, but 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application's been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Now here, CAV A177 at 38 Park Avenue. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, you can please call in at 905-815-6095. The agent can raise their hand if they haven't already done so. Looks like we have Mr. I'm seeing a number of people on the screen. Who is Mr. Martino? You're speaking to this application?
I am, sir. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, looks like you've got some residential objection and staff not in support. So take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino with Gren Weiss Architect and Associate, Oakville, and we are the agents for Mr. and Mrs. Gibbons at 38 Park Avenue. We do have a brief proposal, and I will try to be brief tonight. The proposal is to demolish the existing 2-story dwelling and construct a new 2-story dwelling on the existing lot. We are requesting 1 variance with respect to the height of the dwelling. Could I have slide 2, please? The lot is on the west side of Park Avenue. The top of the page that's cut off in the slide, that's Park Avenue. And it backs onto Raymar Place to the west. That's the bottom. The lot slopes dramatically downwards from Park Avenue to Raymar Place. The overall height differential between the 2 streets at the lot line is approximately 1.64 meters or 5 feet 4 inches. Proposed residence is presently under construction and received a building permit from the town of Oakville in early August 22. The new dwelling meets all setback requirements, coverage, and residential floor area regulations under the zoning bylaw. Dwelling protrudes less into the rear yard, less than the existing dwelling, and you can sort of see the line of the dwelling there. And the proposed dwelling is further that, in other words, closer to the front on Park Avenue. And the setback, the proposed dwelling from Raymar is over 38 meters or 125 feet. It was through the building permit process that the town identified this lot, and it's similar to additional 6 lots on Park Avenue as what they call a through lot, notwithstanding that the lot is separated from Raymar Place by block 24, which is highlighted there, which is a 1-foot reserve, preventing access to the lot from Raymar Place. So the lot is deemed what is called a through lot. As a result of it being deemed that through lot, the established grade calculation from which height is measured is calculated as the average of grade at both lot lines, that being the center of the lot on Park Avenue and the center point of the lot on Raymar Place. The average grade calculation is thus lowered because of the difference of 5 feet 4 inches. Look at it as the average grade calculation is thus lowered by approximately 0.82 meters or 2 feet 9 inches. But I have slide 4. So this is a elevation analysis of, you can see the proposed residence on the left, that's 38 Park, the neighbor to the north, and then the neighbor to the north flat. A couple of things I'd like to point out is, one, the pink line on our proposal represents the outline of the house, which was demolished to permit the construction of this new residence. As you can see from that, the roof line of the dwelling which used to be there is actually higher than the dwelling that's proposed. Additionally, of note, you can see the established grade by calculating it as the average from the elevation at Raymar and the elevation at Park. You can see it noted below the street and the dotted line in the left-hand side. And what that tells you is that the height of the proposed dwelling is not being measured from the midpoint of Park Avenue, but a point, an imaginary point, 2 feet 9 inches below the street level. Further on this diagram, you can actually see to the right, right beside the pink outline chimney of the old house, that our house actually complies with, is under the 9-meter setback if you were to measure it from the midpoint of the lot. Our proposed dwelling is also lower in height than its adjacent neighbor to the north, and as you can see, lower than the adjacent house to that. Could I see slide 5 and slide 6, please? Slide 5 first. Here's a picture that was taken just the other day. You can see the house, the proposed house being built on the left. That's 38 Park. You can see the neighbor to the north. Slide 6, please. And again, that's the neighbor further to the north, 2 doors up that I spoke about. If I could have slide 7. From the point of view of impact, as mentioned, the proposal complies with coverage, the residential floor area, and the setback requirements, all of which it is my submission to contribute to the impact of mass and scale on the street. It is my submission again that the height of the proposed dwelling, being lower than the previous dwelling on the site and lower than the adjacent neighbor to the north, and the measured from Park Street is actually under the 9-meter height as measured from the grade at the street on Park. That the proposal is compatible with respect to size and mass, and that the proposed dwelling will not look out of place or oversized and is consistent and compatible with built form in the neighborhood. Slide 7, please. This is across the street. Slide 5 again, please. And again, you can see highlighted that the house under construction and with its roof is lower than the adjacent house, to the north. I were to do an analysis quickly from Raymar. I have slide 10. Slide 11 then. There, thank you. Oh, back one, please. Thank you. This is the view from Raymar of the rear of the lot. As I previously mentioned, the house is set back over 125 feet. There is no street gate on the east side of Raymar. The 7 lots that back onto it all look similar. Can I have the next slide, please? That's the neighbor's house to the north of our proposed dwelling. You can see the dwelling beside it. And the next slide, please. And that's the house further. Thank you. If I could have slide 15, please. The owners, as is our general order of things, the owners have canvassed widely and received 5 letters of support for the proposal. They have spoken with others who have offered no objection to the proposal, including 34 Park, which is immediately to the south, adjacent neighbors to the south of 38 Park, our proposed house. We are aware of the 3 letters of opposition. We have attempted to speak with those neighbors. I'd like to talk now quickly to the planning staff analysis. We respectfully disagree with the staff's review of the proposal in 3 particular points. The first one being staff's written comment regarding the grade calculation front lot line, which says that the height is measured from the established grade of the property at the front lot line to the roof. I believe this is where some of the confusion come in. As I demonstrated, the actual measurement, which seeks the variance as being is being measured from a point below the center point of the street park. The front lot line is park, and the height is actually being measured to a point lower. The height of the proposed roof contributes to a mass and scale, which the dwelling appears larger than the surrounding dwelling. We disagree respectfully again with that, as I think I've demonstrated. It's only these 7 lots with back onto Raymar, which are subject to the through lot calculation, where all of the other 19 lots, which are on the west side of Park, as well as certainly all of the ones across the street, their height is measured from the midpoint of their lot, and thus enjoy the full 9 meters height from that calculation. Further, staff includes the streetscape and Park Place as demonstrated. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Staff notes that they make the dwelling look taller along the streetscape. If we go back to slide 5. As you can see, the house is no taller. And could we go back to the house before, or the slide before that, please? Slide 4. Yeah. As demonstrated there, the house, again, smaller than the house that was on the existing lot, and it is lower in elevation than the neighbors to the north. In summary, I believe that the proposal and the variance sought for the height is minor in nature and actually technical in nature in the calculation of the average grade in the through lot. That the proposal meets the intent of the OP and complies with the guidelines, specifically 11.1.9, and demonstrates compliance with zoning bylaw. We believe that it maintains the integrity of the development of the neighborhood and is compatible with the other dwellings in the area. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Martino. Any questions for Mr. Martino? I see none. Perhaps I can ask staff after Mr. Martino's very thorough explanation and contention that this is really I'll call it a technical variance, not anything more than that. I was wondering if staff maintain their position in the report or have any other comments to add.
Through the chairs, I would like to say that with the extra information provided this evening, and I would like to change my opinion with supporting the materials, which was not provided with the materials submitted in the application. So I would like to support the application.
Okay, thank you.
Which was
for
not,
that.
yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions of staff? Mr. Flemington.
Sorry, it's not of staff other than to the agent, Mr. Martino. You mentioned that there were 5 letters in support of the application. Were those letters submitted to the town of Oakville?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, they were submitted to the town of Oakville, and I believe, yes, they were submitted.
Okay, thank you. I didn't see those as part of this package. Did I miss something?
No, I think we've only seen the 3 letters of objection. We've not
Right.
seen any letters of support.
Through Mr. Chair, sorry, can I say something?
Yes, please.
The letters and were submitted with presentation after the deadline for submission. We do have a deadline, 12 p.m. The day before the meeting, because we can provide all this stuff to you and to the public. So deadline was passed and they provided. I said, I'm gonna accept the presentation since it's not gonna be impact all other stuff, but the letter of support were not be able to accept. And I told them that it's gonna be together with presentations, so they, and also I believe it's the part of presentations, so you can see whoever submitted support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flemington, you'll have to give the weight that you feel is appropriate based on Mr. Martino's presentation.
Okay, so I did see it outlined on his presentation which neighbors were in opposition and which neighbors were in objection. And so that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, something was presented, but I guess in future that to the agent, maybe we can get those presented on time, because then it makes it easier for us to, you know, review the application in full. That's all my my comments for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Mr. Martino, you wanted to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the member, I apologize. It was my understanding that they were emailed along with the presentation, and the presentation showed up tonight. Those were my comments. I can assure the committee I am in receipt of them. I'd be happy to send them in as part of the file. And I believe the Secretary Treasurer gets to having them. So, but I appreciate it and I apologize.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martino. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
No, Mr. Chair, there is no phone calls.
Okay. With that, then, members, I'm going to close discussion. You've heard from the applicant, you've heard from planning staff, and now looking for a motion. And you've seen the objection letters. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. having heard the additional information and the detailed presentation from Mr. Martino that went through the relationship of the proposed building, not only to Park Avenue, but to Raymar, and related the proposed building to the existing and the previously demolished building, as well as the existing buildings to the north, demonstrating the like relationship and massing that this building would have within this area. On that basis and the basis of the comments from staff, I'd be prepared to put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. And I would make the motion subject to, and bear with me for a moment while I just reference the drawings, that the application, excuse me, that the building be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, if staff are satisfied with that, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Mr. Martino, just seeing that it's the first time you're hearing the conditions, I'll give you an opportunity to comment if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're fine with the conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application.
I believe Mr. Flemington had a comment before we move.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just going to say that I'm in support of the motion, thanking the agent for the presentation, noting, what the impacts are on the neighbors. And so I just wanted to make it known that I agreed with Member Hardcastle's comments. So I favor the motion.
I apologize. I thought that was your hand up in support of the motion. So just for clarity, all those in favor of the motion to approve? Your application is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Now here's CAV A178 343 Leadwood Gate. We have an agent who's been patiently waiting online. Good evening. We get your name and address for the record.
Yeah, good evening, all members. My name is Tarunpreet Kaur. I am the applicant, and my address is Unit 5, 600 Zenway Boulevard. And we are requesting for one variance, which is rear yard setback. So we are proposing a patio cover in the rear yard of the house, which is attached to the house, as you can see in the presentation, which is attached to the rear wall of the house, where the allowable setback is 6 meters. And we are requesting for the variance with the rear yard setback 2.82 meters, because the encroachment is 3.18 meter, whereas the allowable is 2.5 meters. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any members, any questions for the applicant? If anyone wishes to speak to this application, should have done this earlier, 905-815-6095. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There has been no phone calls up to now.
I would note that there was one letter of support, no opposition submitted to the committee. So I'll just check one more time, Madam Secretary Treasurer. Nobody's called in.
No phone calls.
Okay, we'll close discussion. I'll look for a motion. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have reviewed the applicant's written submission, also noting that the town's staff report is in support of the motion, and also noting that there was one letter of support in writing. I am prepared to move a motion that the application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets all four tests under the Planning Act. I would like to include the following condition: that the rear porch accessory structure be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated February 14th, 2022. And our second standard condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion? I see none. All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Now here's CAV A179 at 133 Creek Path Avenue. Anyone wishing to speak to this application can call in at 905-815-6095, 905-815-6095. Yeah, we have the agent for the applicant. Good evening. If we get your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, good evening. This is Via speaking, and is from Land and Building Experts, located 570 Alton Road in Markham. So we are the agent of the client for this license application. So
Please
we're
proceed.
sorry. Yes. So we are just here to legalize the insufficient setback for the existing frame shed in the rear yard. The current frame shed has interior side setback of 0.5 meters and a rear yard of 0.12 meters, where the zoning bylaw permitted at a minimum 0.6 meter. So this building was built in 2007, and the building itself is less than 10 square meter, which doesn't really need a building permit. And the owner at the time the owner construct this frame shed, they didn't really notice the insufficient setback. And now we're applying for the full permit, and we have a new survey which shows this insufficient setback, and that's why we're here for the minor variance to legalize but we're not making any change to the existing shed.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Committee members, any question for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There has been no phone calls, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll then close discussion and we'll look for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you to the chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, the submitted drawings, and having heard the presentation of the agent, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. And I will put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions, those being that the existing frame shed accessory building be permitted in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated August 30th, 2022, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. We will now hear CAV A109, which was deferred from July, the 1118 Lakeshore Road East. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, can you please call in at 905-815-6095. And I see, looks like Denise Baker is going to speak to this application.
Sorry, I was on mute there. You think I'd have this nailed by now? I am, sir. I am here as legal counsel to the applicant. With me is Mr. Jim Levesque of GSAI, the planning consultant. And Jim will actually take you through the variances being requested and the 4 tests. I'm here to answer any questions that may arise as a result of the presentation or in response to any of the any other comments that might be made. So I'd like to turn it over to Jim at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Baker. Good evening, Mr. Levesque.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee. And thank you, Denise. So what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is just spend a few brief moments just going through the variances, and then Christina Uchiyama, the project heritage consultant, will make a few brief concluding notes on the heritage issues raised. If we could go to, I guess the next slide, which is just an aerial photo, so sort of setting the table or the context for this property. You know, you can see we're pretty close to Chester Hill and another rather large rebuild across the street at 11 Lakeshore. This is an interesting lot because it's about 88 meters long, but it's wider at the front than it is at the back. It almost looks like it was originally some sort of a square shape at the front, and this sort of tapered rectangular box-like addition was added to the back. I'm not really sure how those lot dimensions were evolved historically. As you can see, the house is already well set back from Lakeshore Road East. It's about 23 meters set back. It's a designated heritage home, so obviously nothing's going to get put in front of it. There was a smaller addition behind the existing heritage house that lines up with a garage structure as well. So really the only logical area to expand the home is within this rear tapered area behind the home and the addition. And this is really in an area that has never been visible from Lakeshore Road East. If we could go to slide 4, where we've summarized the variances. So we've numbered each variance here, Mr. Chairman. So I'll try to get through these as quickly as I can. Variance number 1 is, you can see there's an angled measurement of 15.75 meters. This is how the width of the garage is measured, or the width of the driveway is measured. Now, our client purchased the property with this as an existing condition. It wasn't created. So I don't know whether, and I may have to defer to Denise on this, whether it's a legal non-conforming use issue. What I will say though is, you know, as a driveway, I think it's a much better condition to have in front of an existing heritage house, where in a neighborhood where you predominantly have a lot of circular driveways that tend to detract from the front facade of the home. Here we just have manicured lawn and trees, an unimpeded view of the original heritage house, which I believe is a better condition. So I believe our ask on this variance, Mr. Chairman, would be to simply legalize which has existed on the site for quite a while to date. Getting on to variance number 2, this is the garage addition to permit a maximum total private garage area of 137.56 square meters, whereas the maximum private garage area of 56 meters is required The existing garage is well set back from the front of the existing heritage house. And even with the addition that's being proposed, which has the number 2 on it, you can see there, will still continue to be recessed from the main facade of the house. We believe the variance is appropriate. It allows tandem parking to occur within the garage and gets it off of the driveway. And if you, as you'll see in some of the street renderings later on, when you look at the house from the street, you really don't see much of a, if any, difference in terms of the front elevation with the garage addition in front of the existing garage. The third and fourth variants, Mr. Chairman, again, are pinch points where these setbacks are an existing condition that have existed for a long time. On that basis, we think these are minor. We're improving that condition throughout the length of the house. There are areas where it gets as close to 4 meters, on average about 3 meters on either side. So that those variances, again, I'm not sure whether those would be deemed any sort of an extension or enlargement of an existing legal non-conforming use, but they have been there for a long time. The fifth variance is the length variance, and this is the result of the configuration of the lot and trying to construct a reasonably sized addition behind the front facade of a heritage house on a lot that tapers. So if you take a cross section, you know, on that 42.25 meter length or 42.52 meter length, you're basically looking at sort of a corridor of the house where that condition exists and doesn't exist anywhere else on the house. Obviously, we can't move the addition closer to the street and sort of create your typical box shape house. So it's really a function of additions and corridors. And you really have two sort of corridors in the what I would call the rectangular tapered addition at the back. One is more of a pedestrian sort of a uninhabitable space, and the other one on the east side is habitable space. You know, obviously there would be ways to reduce that number if you were to notch out a section of that that measurement within the addition area. But I really don't think it's going to be anything that you would notice from the street looking at the property. The sixth variance, Mr. Chairman, is the actual coverage variance. And again, this as I said, on the westerly side of the house, you have features that are not enclosed, such as a breezeway, a covered porch, you have the rear covered porch, and a covered walkway. And when you combine this with the front porch and the garage, you get an area.
Mr. Levac, if I could just interrupt you for a second. Is anyone else getting significant feedback all of a sudden?
Yes.
It just started, so I don't think it's the same issue we had earlier. Mr. Levac, could you perhaps say something again?
Yes. I'm not hearing it on my end. Is it still going through?
No, we're getting significant feedback on our end. Madam Secretary Treasurer, can you check with IT again, please?
Yes, I checked and they said it's Mr. Levac microphone. If he can just adjust maybe or do something.
I suspect it's integrated in his computer.
I've turned down my speaker. Does that make a difference?
No.
Not yet. It just started.
Yeah, do you have any other devices open or anything like the cell phone or anything like that?
I just turned my cell phone off, but it was on mute.
No, it's the same problem.
Are you able to log out and join again?
Yeah, it's probably the best thing to try.
Sure. Stephanie, can we do it on your computer? Okay. Stephanie Medivh is here in the office with me as well, so maybe we'll call in her computer.
Thank you.
We're almost through the presentation.
Thank
Okay,
you.
if you could log out and call back, that'd be great. Thank you. Ms. Baker, would it maybe be appropriate? I think you also wanted to have your heritage consultant speak. Maybe while we're waiting for Mr. Levac, she could talk to the committee.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I believe she's just turned on her camera, and so we could turn it over to Chris.
Good evening. Will you just get your name and address, please?
So my name is Chris Uchiyama of LHC Heritage. I'm at 5200 Yonge Street in North York, Ontario. Okay. So I'm just moving things around. I believe the last slide in this presentation may show a street view of the proposal, and that may help to contextualize from the heritage perspective. Maybe up one more. Oh. No, you can go to the end slide. Sorry, apologies. So LHC prepared a heritage impact assessment starting in January of 2022. And we found that the proposal is generally consistent and conforms with the applicable heritage planning, legislation, and policy, and that potential impacts can be mitigated through project planning and implementation. With respect to concerns with standards and guidelines, standard 12, we wanted to stress that although the scale of the addition is greater than the existing building, which you can see if you go to the slide, the previous slide, it's been designed specifically not to exceed the height of the heritage house and to retain the prominence of the 1866 residence, as well as that two-story sunroom. The use of subordinate in the S&Gs is not necessarily a question of size. So a small, ill-conceived addition could adversely affect the heritage attributes of the property, whereas there's lots of examples of larger additions. There's some high profile ones like Castle Kilbride in Baden, Ottawa City Hall, where you have additions that are much larger than the heritage building, and the way that they're designed through material, color palette, and other design features makes them still compatible and subordinate to the heritage property. So the proposed addition in this case has been designed with a view to being distinguishable from that 1866 residence in the sunroom, while still making use of materials, color palette, and elements that were selected for visual compatibility. With respect to standard 11, if you just go to the next slide, please. So there are some questions from staff related to retention of extant exterior walls and the methodology for ensuring that the form and integrity of the structure will be retained if the new addition is removed in the future. And we feel that that is best addressed through discussions during the heritage permit process and during detailed design. And at the same time, some of the concerns related to materials, design of chimneys and doors, and other architectural details can be mitigated during that process. And that will also help to further address the concerns related to standard 12. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions related to the heritage, but I'll have to defer to Jim for the other planning concerns.
Okay, thank you. I'll just ask committee members whether they have any specific heritage questions. Doesn't look like it, so let's try to go back to Mr. Levac.
Hi, am I audible now?
That's way better, thank you.
It's funny how the people who've worked here the longest have the lousiest equipment. I'll have to put in for some improvements. So my apologies for the technical glitch, Mr. Chairman. As I was just finishing up on the sixth variance, I guess the point to be made was that a lot of these unenclosed, uninhabitable structures are being included for the purpose of calculating lot coverage. And whether that's artificial or just depending on the bylaw, some municipalities don't include things like that, some do, but they basically represent the 6.5 or whatever deficiency we do have, and which we consider minor in nature regardless. Just turning to the staff report and the Fort Planning Act tests, I'm not seeing a proposal here that in any way creates a neighborhood character compatibility issue as staff are asserting in their report. We all know the definition of compatible in the neighborhood planning context as being not the same, but being able to coexist amongst without any unacceptable adverse impact. I'm not seeing anything here that creates such an impact, whether it be massing, height, overlook, shadowing, anything that threatens the character or planned function of the neighborhood. We have made a point of including shadow drawings on slides 14, 15, and 16 under the worst possible date and time scenario, and there really is no measurable shadow impact. On the coverage issue, again, I don't see 31% lot coverage creating an overdevelopment of the lot. I think what's being proposed is proportional to the size of the lot. And again, the difference between 25% and 31% is being taken up by non-enclosed, non-habitable space. I believe the application meets the Fort Planning Act test as it meets the general intent of the OPA and zoning bylaw. The variances are minor, and the development maintains an attractive and desirable streetscape that respects the existing heritage house. And just getting back to that, as Christina was showing earlier, we included a slide which is number 9. If we could go ahead 5. So that's basically what you see now from the street. And then the following slide, number 10, is what you ultimately will see. So other than a little bit of filling in between the house and the garage where the breezeway exists, you really don't see any noticeable changes from the street. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the time and your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Levesque. Mr. Levesque, can you speak to staff's comment which suggests that the driveway variance is insufficient based on the combination of the driveway and landscaping?
Insufficient as in, I mean, it's an existing condition.
Driveway is potentially.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Zoning is wider than the variance you applied for?
Yeah, the maximum driveway width in the bylaw is 9 meters. They're measuring it on an angle from the corner of the back out space in a straight line, which is the methodology the bylaw employs to measure the driveway width. So obviously, yeah, if you measure it that way, there's a deficiency.
Ask staff to comment on that.
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if I might assist on that as well.
Certainly.
Staff's comments are suggest on on page 4 of 12 of the comments. It says that staff's of the opinion that a variance regarding driveway width is interrelated to the variance regarding private garage floor area, since the increased width is proposed to accommodate the larger garage. And sir, I submit to you that it's actually, that appears to be a misunderstanding of the variance for the driveway width. The garage today is currently a triple car garage. The garage proposed is a triple car garage. The added floor area to the garage is to the rear of it, so it has zero impact on the driveway itself. It's the driveway is the existing condition. So it appears that there is some misunderstanding by staff as to the nature of that variance for the driveway width. I will comment, and I cast no aspersions by this. It just is a fact of life. This is our 3rd planner on this file. And each time we've made some changes to accommodate the comments of the previous planner, it's a new planner. So it may just be that there's just some misunderstanding of that variance. But the driveway condition is the driveway condition as it is today. So the floor area of the garage has no impact on that.
Well, I'm actually commenting on a different part, but we'll ask staff to speak to it. My interpretation of what they're suggesting is that you have to include the adjacent paving stones in the driveway width, and that the variance that's requested isn't sufficient for the existing condition, but we'll get staff to comment on that.
And if that's the case, so then we would have, if that is the case, then we would have to adjust with perhaps soft landscaping or something else that's permitted by the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, any questions for the applicants? I see none, so perhaps I can ask staff to comment with respect to the item we were just discussing.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you summarized the concern in terms of the stone paving in proximity to the driveway. And as Ms. Baker has alluded to, that there is opportunity to adjust the walkway connection to the driveway through landscaping or other opportunities such as requesting a revised variance. It's up to the applicant how they'd like to address it. We've put it into the report to bring it to their attention.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Levac, just one further question. I may have missed it, but I don't think I heard you address staff's concern with the depth and the overlook being that the building would now be essentially in the neighbor's rear yard.
Yeah, the way that the designer designed it was that there would be no habitable space on that side of the backyard. It's basically a corridor that connects the garage to close to the cabana. There's an outdoor fireplace, there's an overhead roof on it so to keep the elements off, but it's really non-habitable space that they would be overlooking onto.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions for the applicants, Madam Secretary Treasurer, is anyone calling in to speak to this application?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Just a second, I'm gonna promote.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Just for the record, my name is Guzlin Mutlu, and I'm here on behalf of a neighbor, Mr. Rodrigue Barakat. And just to put my address on record as well, we work for Connor McLeod Hanna LLP, and the address is 700 Kerr Street, Unit 300 in the town of Oakville.
And what is the address of the neighbor you're speaking for?
The address of the neighbor is 83 Brentwood Road in the town of Oakville.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, perfect. And again, this is just regarding item 6.9, 1118 Lakeshore Road East. And we were here as well on July 5th, 2022. And that's been deferred to today. Again, as you are aware, under the Planning Act, the variance application must maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan, the town zoning bylaw, and to be a desirable variance for the appropriate development or use of land and be a minor variance application. Based on our review of the drawings, reports, and other materials, our client's primary concerns with respect to the variance requests are variance 4, the minimum westerly interior side yard, variance 5, the maximum dwelling depth, variance 6, the maximum lot coverage, and variance 7, which is the maximum height of the accessory building. I'm going to start off with variance 4, which is the minimum side yard requirements on the westerly side. Under the town zoning bylaw, the applicant's property is required to have a minimum interior side yard of 4.2 meters, but the applicants have made a variance request to permit a minimum westerly interior side yard of 1.71 meters. In other words, this is a 60% reduction from the minimum side yard requirements. The applicant's westerly side yard abuts with our client's backyard, so a decrease in the minimum westerly side requirements will allow the applicant to build and erect a structure extremely close to Mr. Bearcat's property. And just to put into context, the north and east sections of his property abut with the west and south sections of the applicant's property. While my client does not have any specific concerns regarding the applicant's intention to extend the existing garage, he does have concerns regarding the proposed covered porch, which only allows for a setback of approximately 3 meters when 4.2 meters is required. The minimum side yard regulation under the town zoning bylaw is intended to ensure that an adequate degree of separation is provided between the dwellings on adjacent parcels and to ensure adequate privacy and drainage. The covered porch, which is to be built close towards Mr. Bearcat's property, would not allow for an adequate degree of separation between the properties, nor adequate privacy, drainage, or access and circulation. And these impacts are to be minimized as required under the official plan, and that's policy 11.1.9H. Next, I'll just talk about the variance number 5, that's maximum dwelling depth. According to the town zoning bylaw, the maximum depth permitted for the applicant's property is 20 meters, but the applicant has made a variance request to permit a depth of 42.52 meters, which is more than double the depth. The maximum dwelling depth regulation under the zoning bylaw is intended to control the mass and scale of dwellings and to prevent the building structure from becoming overbearing on any adjacent property. The proposed one-story residential addition is intended to extend deep into the applicant's backyard and will be at almost a 2-story height. While the resulting increase in dwelling depth is excessive from a quantitative perspective, it will also have a very large qualitative impact. The proposed building structure along the eastern portion of the applicant's property will be overbearing on Mr. Bearcat's property, contrary to the intent of the zoning bylaw. Mr. Bearcat is concerned about the resulting darkness from the structure's shadows, the obstruction of his view due to this man-made structure, and the lack of privacy due to the addition being built extremely close up against their backyard. Once again, these impacts are to be minimized according to the official plan, and that's policy 11.1.9H. Next, I need to talk about variance 6, that's the maximum lot coverage. The applicant seeks to permit a maximum lot coverage of 31.79%, whereas the zoning bylaw permits a maximum lot coverage of 25%. Briefly, the intent of the maximum lot coverage regulation is to ensure that appropriately sized dwellings are built on the lot to control mass and scale, restrict excess development, and maintain adequate open and green space. The applicants are proposing a 187.5 square meter increase in additional lot coverage, which will result in excess development, more hardscaping and patio surface, and less green space. The subject property is also a large lot, which already allows for a greater amount of lot coverage, since lot coverage is a percentage of the area of the lot. Additionally, this overdevelopment of the backyard of the property is not consistent with the neighborhood character, as the development should be compatible with the setbacks and separation distances within the surrounding neighborhood according to the official plan. And that's policy 11.1.9B. I'd like to talk about variance 7, the maximum height for the accessory building next. The applicant also seeks to permit a maximum building height for an accessory structure of 5.28 meters, whereas the town zoning bylaw permits a maximum height for accessory structures of 4 meters. The proposed skylight for the pool house is larger than the maximum size permitted for the exemption under the town zoning bylaws. And one of the intents of the maximum height provisions for accessory structures is to ensure that such structures remain ancillary and subordinate to the main use permitted on the subject property. Given the size of the pool house, which is again on the side that my client's property is, it is possible that it may not be ancillary to the subject property. Additionally, given the location of the pool house, Being in the rear yard next to Mr. Bearcat's property, it is likely to cast a shadow over his backyard and to obstruct the view from his backyard and from inside his home, and to minimize privacy, as you have development a lot closer to his rear backyard. And then I'd like to briefly just touch on the town's comments. We largely agree with the town's comments in its minor variance report, including its comment that the increase in the lot coverage and dwelling depth in combination with the reduced side yard setback for the full length of the dwelling results in an impact that is considered unacceptable. We also agree with the town's findings regarding variance requests 1 through 6, including its findings with respect to the official plan and the zoning bylaw. I do want to point out, though, that we do disagree with the town's finding that variance request number 7, which is the accessory building height, is supported under section 45(1) of the Planning Act. Respectfully, I think the town's findings may be due in part to some confusion regarding the type of accessory structure. I noticed that the town notes the accessory structure as a detached garage, but the variance request is for the proposed pool house in the rear yard. And to conclude, based on our analysis, variance 4, 5, 6, and 7 should not be supported, as they do not maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan and the town zoning bylaw. They are not a desirable variance for the appropriate development or use of land, and are not a minor variance, as is required under the Planning Act. The cumulative impact of these variances is a negative and adverse impact on adjacent properties, including Mr. Bearcat's property. Accordingly, we ask that the Committee of Adjustment refuse the application. While our client has indicated that he is willing to work with the applicants, his neighbors, to address these concerns and find a workable solution, the current request will have a significant detrimental impact on his property and other neighboring properties. Additionally, since this application was deferred in July 2022, meaningful changes have not been made by the applicant to address any of our client's concerns. Finally, I would like to just add that the first letter of support in the addendum is from a neighbor that has one of the largest lots in Oakville and does not share any boundaries with the applicant's property. And the second letter of support, is from a neighbor to the east of the property, but the pool house, the covered porch, the extended garage, and the additional structures are proposed on the west side of the property, which is the side that my client lives on. And I'd like to end there. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Those are my submissions.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions for the neighbors agent? I see none. I have one question. Was the applicant aware of your client's concerns back in July, or only just when this came back to committee?
No, the applicant was aware of our client's concerns back in July, and they've been in communication since before the initial hearing as well.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, is anyone else called in to speak to this application?
There is no phone call.
Okay, then I'll give Ms. Baker or Mr. Levesque an opportunity.
Sorry, this is Rod Bearcat. I had requested to speak. I'm the neighbor at 83 Brentwood.
Okay, and that was your counsel that just spoke?
That's correct.
Okay, very quickly, because we've already heard from your agent what the concerns are here.
Sure. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak. What I'd like to point is the fact that we purchased this property for the features that it provides: privacy, it provides an open lot, it provides us with green space. The project that is in front of us essentially removes all the features of which we got attracted to that particular lot. Further, like the extension of that is proposed is bringing a lot of windows that are directly facing our property, our common living area. And so we're talking their bedroom facing our living room, their bedroom facing our kitchen, their bedroom facing our eating area. This is not we used to live in Joshua Creek where lots were small, and we decided to take a huge mortgage and move closer to an area where we would have some privacy. To allow a project like that would essentially bring us back to our old neighborhood, which is not something that we're desiring. I told very vividly to my neighbor that if a project like that was allowed to be built, that I would ask him to just let me know so I can move. This is how significant this is impacting our family. It was noted by our council that it's a two-story addition. In looking at how deep this extension is going, it's going to be blocking our view. We have two sides of our property that are going to be obstructed by a two-story building. Our pool is right there. This is where the natural light, the wind comes in to be able to make us enjoy that area. Trees are already large. We're very reluctant on cutting trees. And so if we allow on top of it structures to be built and additional trees to be cut, we're losing all the benefits that we've had. We're squaring off an enjoyable area that we have. We're taking something that's beautiful, that is known to the area, and we're completely changing it. I'd like to just make some comments to Mr. Levac, who referenced the two large lots in the area. And I'd like to point the fact that there are huge setbacks for both of these properties. Over here, we're trying to build a project that both of these houses don't have a depth of 42.5 meters. Both of these large lots don't have that depth, and yet they have much larger properties. So, I'm speaking emotionally because this is something that is affecting us emotionally. This is affecting my family. It's affecting us psychologically. It has a huge impact, and I would like the committee to strongly consider our opinion. I will remind the committee as well that all the neighboring properties south of Lakeshore, to the exception of the very large home, are not inhabited by their owners other than me. And so there's one property that's currently sitting vacant. The property north of us is being rented, and the property east of the proposed project is currently being rented. And so we're the only people living in that area that actually will be physically impacted by those changes. And I think the committee needs to realize this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the neighbor? I see none. So Ms. Baker or Mr. Levac have an opportunity to respond.
Thank you, sir. I will speak first, and then I'm sure Mr. Levac. If I mess up, Mr. Levac will correct me. It appears, and I'm wondering if I could ask staff to please put the presentation back up, because it does appear that there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what the project is. And while that's happening, I'd like to just correct a few factual errors that were stated. First of all, the letters of support are by the neighbor to the east and the neighbor to the east. And they are impacted, and I would suggest more so than the neighbor to the west, because there's habitable living space on the east setback, and they recognize the uniqueness of the lot and are in support of the variance. The neighbor to the south, the large lot, it does share a property boundary. I'm not sure why council has suggested otherwise, and in fact, you can see that in the air photo. In fact, it does share a southerly boundary with the subject property. And you can see that on this slide here. Their tennis courts are directly to the rear of the subject site. The comment was that no meaningful change has been made since the last one, and that's also incorrect. A variance was removed as it related to the height of the addition, particularly on this west side of the property, and that variance has been removed in its entirety in an attempt to address the concerns of this neighbor. I also note, I'm wondering if we could go to slide 8, please. This is the current view of the neighbor's backyard. You can see that there's a lot of existing screening, and this is evergreen screening. You'll also note that there is a second-story balcony on the neighbor's property, and that second-story balcony allows this property to view directly into the rear yard of my client's property. And so the privacy issue that they've raised strikes me as a bit concerning, given the existence of their decision to have a second floor balcony on the property. I would also note that slide, if we could go to slide 13. Thank you. This is the rear yard, and on the left-hand side of your screen. So this rendering, I would be standing on the green lawn, and in front of me is the pool, and then is the courtyard. And the if I understand counsel for the neighbor, their concern is with this covered porch that's right on your left-hand side. And you can see that there are, in fact, no windows. There's no habitable space. There's no bedroom overlooking anyone's kitchen or backyard. It's this rear yard porch. And you can see that it's not like it's a blank wall situation. It's a small portion of this porch that is used for the fireplace. But otherwise provides that screening from that second floor balcony into my client's yard. And you'll note that they've raised concerns with views. Those views would be into my client's yard. And if those are obstructed, I think we can all agree that there's no right of a view in law. And it seems odd that they're concerned about privacy and at the same time complaining that they would no longer have a view into my client's yard. I also note that they've raised concerns with drainage. There is no evidence before you, I don't think, and no concerns that have been raised with respect to any element of drainage associated with that side yard, nor frankly with respect to the side yard on the east side as well. And I would also, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. Counsel for the neighbor has also indicated that there will be adverse shadow impacts. In response to that, that was raised again in July, although not required for single detached dwellings. A shadow study was done, and it in fact demonstrates the opposite, that there are no adverse shadow impacts. I also note that counsel for the neighbor has indicated that perhaps the pool house is not an ancillary dwelling. It is under the definition of under the zoning bylaw. It absolutely is, and there's been certainly no concern raised by staff in that respect. I submit to you all that this is a very unique lot with a unique lot depth. That is not seen in the neighborhood for the most part, and is not really what the zoning bylaw was intending to govern, and hence our requirement to be here for the variances. But I would just say that perhaps if we could go to back to my apologies, I should have had the slide number for you. Sorry, I'm just going to get the proper slide. Slide 6, please. Thank you very much. You can see on this, and unfortunately you can't see my cursor, but if you actually come down the west side of the property, you can see the driveway, you can see the garage, which they've indicated they're not concerned with. Going back from there, that's the covered walkway, no habitable space. And then you get to the covered porch that I showed you the rendering of. So those concerns about privacy, about principal rooms, looking into that side yard, the neighbor's just there immediately to the left. It's just not borne out by the plans, and so I would ask you to take note of that. And subject to any questions any of you may have, those are my submissions in support of this application.
Okay, thank you. Committee, any further questions of Ms. Baker? Mr. Levac, did you have any quick additional responses?
Mr. Chairman, I believe Ms. Baker captured most of what I would have addressed. The only thing is that again I'd reiterate is those interior side yard setbacks our existing pinch point conditions. And careful effort has been made to increase them on either side of the lot.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to close discussion on this file and looking for a motion.
May I make a comment? I'm sorry.
No,
I'd
sorry,
like-
you had your opportunity to speak, sir.
It's in comment to Ms. Baker's
No, you
comments.
don't get an opportunity to rebut the rebuttal. That's the procedure. It's very clearly laid out in the procedural order and the as discussed beginning of the meeting. So I've closed the discussion at this point, and there's no further opportunity to speak. And again, I'm going to look to committee members for a motion. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the applicant for, making an effort to sort of review, why this was deferred. I know that there are a few items in here that I think are covered under the town staff report that, they are in support of. Personally, I'm not comfortable moving a motion in support of this application. I think that there are a number of items that continue to have a negative impact on the, with regards to the surrounding neighbors. I'm also thinking that there are other things that could be done with regards to some of the variances that have been applied to. So I'm not comfortable moving a motion in support of this application because I tend to side with many of the comments that have been put into writing by the town staff report. I did take into consideration the presentation that was provided tonight by the applicant's agent and counsel, and I didn't find that there were a number of things that would change my opinion on that. I think that I find that I do note that there were two letters of support for the application. I do note that there was opposition received in writing, one letter of objection, as well as during the presentation this evening, there was the neighboring tenant, or sorry, not tenant, neighboring resident that spoke against some of the concerns of the variances that have been requested and what those impacts would be on them, as well as their counsel illustrating some of the aspects of what the impacts of those variants, should they be approved, would be with regards to themselves. So I don't find that this application meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'd like to move a motion that it be denied.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on the motion? Mr. Hardcastle.
Just very briefly, I won't take the time to more than to say that I would agree with the comments that were brought forward by my colleague here, and I will be supporting the motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. I will just add that I am of a like mind. I believe that this application represents an undesirable overbuild for this property. With that, I will call for a vote on the motion to deny the application. That is unanimous. Ms. Baker, your application has been denied.
Thank you, sirs. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. We will move to the final application of the night, to CAV A152 at 2061 Lakeshore Road East. Anyone wishing to speak to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Like we have Ms. Victor here. Thank you for your patience.
Good evening. I'm here tonight on behalf of the application CAVA 152-2022 at 2601 Lakeshore Road East. This application was deferred in order to come back today to ensure that we have the correct variances before the committee. This application is for 5 minor variances to permit the construction of a new 2-story detached dwelling. The previous dwelling on the home had been demolished a number of years ago. Town staff have provided an extensive report indicating that the application meets the criteria under the Livable Oakville Plan in section 1119, as well as meets the 4 tests under the Planning Act. We are in agreement with staff's comments on this application and equally agree. We have reviewed the conditions proposed for the application and are in agreement with them. So I'm here to answer any questions that the committee may have regarding this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Victor. Any questions for the applicant? I see none. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in to speak to this application?
There is no phone calls, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I'm going to close discussion and look for a motion. Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, having heard Ms. Victor's presentation, I'm satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated August 4th, 2022, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve? That is unanimous. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. That concludes the applications for tonight. We have minutes from October 18th to confirm. Select Mr. Hardcastle. Thank you. And motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle again. We are adjourned at 9:44.